Hello everyone, welcome to our PowerPoint presentation for Build for Bharat Hackathon organized by ONDC. We are team retrievers. Our team leader is Shubham Das and I am Yash Mukhopadhyay, the only other member of this team. And our problem statement is optimal storage and retrieval of Pincode in a M cross N sparse matrix. So talking about the architecture and design of our solution, we have provided a Flux-based application for managing the buyer and merchant Pincode database separately. So talking about the modularity of the architecture, our model as a modular architecture dividing the different functionalities into different components for the merchants and the buyers separately. A separate merchant's login page and the buyer's login page has been provided for handling the merchant data and the buyer's data, which are later connected together to provide the dynamicness. Now talking about the reusability of the system, we have a separate merchant retrieve section and the buyer's retrieve section for retrieving the Pincode of the merchants and see if it is available for the buyers as per the Pincodes entered by the buyers. And our solution is independent of different parts, like we have a separate database which operates independently, the backend part operates independently of each other, and so is the front end, which are then finally connected to provide the ultimate solution. And talking about the scalability, we have chosen SQLite database for managing the database system here, but however we can also shift to scalable solutions like PostgreSQL or MySQL for handling the large scale data. And talking about the security, we have used Hypertext Transfer Protocol secured version, that is HTTPS, in our project, and we can also further implement securities like encryption to encrypt the details entered by the merchant or the buyers. Now talking about the basic architecture, we starting with the backend part. The main coding language used here is Python, so everything in the backend is Python based, and Flask is a Python framework for developing web-based applications. SciPy or NumPy are two different modules in Python used for the mathematical operations on the sparse matrix performed in our project. And Jinja template is used as a connector for connecting the backend with the front end or user interface of the system. Now talking about the database part, we have used here the SQLite database. And SQL Alchemy is a connector or a framework rather, which connects the database with the backend. And finally here in the front end part, we have used HTML or hypertext markup language, which is the backbone of our web page. Yes, and for styling purpose we have used CSS for all the dynamic animations and everything used in our project, and the JavaScript first makes the entire system even more dynamic. And finally, talking about the entity relationship diagram, we have two separate entities, the merchant database and the buyer's database, having a connection between them, or the merchant buyer relationship. Now the merchant database has the various attributes, starting with the merchant's email ID, which is a primary key. Then we have merchant's name and merchant's password, which are entered by the merchant. And then there are other three attributes, like that is the non-zero elements of the merchant's pin code, the row indices of the non-zero elements, and the column indices of the non-zero elements. Similarly, in the buyer's entity or buyer's database, there is a primary key, which is the buyer's email ID. Then we have the buyer's pin code as well as buyer's password that are entered by the buyer. Now talking about a test data case, we have a set of pin codes for different districts across different states of our country, CSV file regarding this dataset has already been uploaded in our GitHub repository, the link to which has been provided in the later slides. Now, if we talk about the basic functionality or how our website works, we start with the home page where the users have basically the two options: logging in as merchant or logging in as buyer. The login as merchant page consists of the merchant details like the merchant's name, merchant's password, as well as the pin codes that are served by the merchant. All this data is stored in the merchant database, and in login as buyer section, the buyer enters the buyer's name and password as well as the pin code for which he wants to see the any merchant is available or not, and all this data is again stored in the merchant database, the buyer's database, and the merchant's pin code are then retrieved to see if the pin code queried by the buyer is available for a particular merchant. Then there are other two sections: the about page, which basically describes the basic function, it gives the documentation about our project, and the contact us page contains the contact details of the two team members of our team, that is Shubham and me. Now, smart optimal storage and retrieval of pin code in Pincode serviceability checking using a relational database. Now, talking about the merchant registration page, there are the following four fields: the merchant's email ID, the merchant's name, the merchant's password, as well as the pin code. Now, thing that I would like to mention here about the pin codes is that it is not necessary that a particular merchant will serve a single particular pin code, but he or she can serve more than one pin code areas. So first, the pin code entered is converted into a list of pin codes, a pin code list. Now this list is then separated into three parts: an array of non-zero elements in the pin code, row indices of the non-zero elements, which is also stored as an array, and the column indices of the non-zero elements of the pin code, which is again stored as an array. And all this data, that is the email ID, name, password, and the pin codes entered, are together stored in a merchant database, and this is the data is converted to a sparse matrix. Now, talking about the buyer's registration part, we have buyer's email ID, buyer's password, as well as the pin code for querying whether the serviceability is available in that area. Now, all this information is stored in the buyer's database, and then this pin code, which is queried by the buyer, is then sent through a retrieval algorithm, which then displays whether any merchant is available for that particular pin code to serve the buyer. Now we have finally this link to our GitHub repository, and then we have this link to the CSV file, which has also been uploaded in our GitHub repository, as I have already mentioned earlier. And then we have the link to this video, YouTube video, which will be available once the video has been uploaded. And finally, this is our project link, which is hosted on the Google Cloud platform. By clicking on it, we can just view our website. So that was it from my side, and now I will hand it over to my team leader Shubham Das to carry on with the rest of the video. Thank you.
Hello viewer, I am Shubham Das and also the team leader of this team named Retrievers. As already discussed by my teammate Yash Mukhopadhyay in the PowerPoint presentation, that we are actually building an application, basically a web-based application for the pin code based serviceability checker with optimal storage and retrieval of pin codes in M×N sparse matrix. So basically, one of the famous quote that I have learned just yesterday, that if you don't understand what the problem anyone want to solve, you just try to understand what is getting input and output in that computational box. Same if we will able to apply it here, So first we have to check that what are the inputs that are going to be taken by these applications and what are the outputs are given by this application. Basically, this project description, according to this project description, pin code based serviceability allows merchant to define the pin codes where they can deliver their product services. Merchant define the pin code they serve, and the buyer app verify whether a particular pin code can be served by any of the available merchant or not. So as an input, the buyer will give its detail and the query pin code, and the same as the merchant also give their details and the pin codes where they can avail their services. And in the output of buyer section, using the retrieve algorithm, on the basis of the query pin code, the respective available merchant name or details will be reflected to the buyer's page. So now I will going to show you the implementation of this application in VS Code. Here basically we are using relational database to collect the data from merchant and buyer. Also in backend part we are using Flask framework to get integrate with the front end, and including Flask we are also using Jinja template or preferably render template used to interact with front end and back end in real time. So now I will going to start the project. So first we have to type python app.py because the main backend part is stored in the file app.py and all the related front end are stored in templates and static folder. The same folders are also going to be available on the GitHub repo. The slight changes in the GitHub repo is that application folder which store all these different types of files and folders in itself. You will get a normal folder just like here. So as I have discussed, first we have to type in terminal python space app.py, and after putting enter we will get our local machine network IP. We have to copy it, and it will vary with different local machines. Whenever you will going to install it in your local machine by following the process of installation in the GitHub repo, you will have different this network address according to your computer. So just copy it and paste it here in your address bar and enter, and the application is in active mode. Also in the VS Code you will see that the application have restarted or initiated and all the available details are shown here. So here this is the first page. Whenever you will going to open it, the first page that you will show that it will show is this page, home part. Here the two options are available, login as a merchant and login as a buyer. So let's move towards the login as a merchant. Give a name of merchant. Let's suppose for example Apario details, and giving an arbitrary email apario@mail.com, then a random password, and last but not the least we can give as much as pin codes we want to give. For example, for in this case I want to give 3 pin codes. The first pin code is 302021, the second pin code will be 712235, and the last pin code will be 7 5 zeros. And after submitting it, now we will going to check what is stored in our merchant database. So for this I will use an online platform SQLite Online, and in this segment I will open the database, is the merchant database, and I will show up the table here. Here you can see the merchant ID, merchant name and the merchant password, and the respective 3 attributes: non-zero pin code, row indices and column indices. And basically it stored the non-zero elements of the pin code in serial order, and also taking the information of their row number, means the non-zero elements row number in another attribute in a serial way, and the column as well, and stored it here. Then after this, if we went back to the home page and trying to log in as a buyer, we put here arbitrary buyer mail. For case I will put my mail and then an arbitrary password, and the pin code that I want to show. So if you have remember, in the merchant part we have given one pin code name, pin code which is 302021. Before submitting it, I would like to again show up you the database here. So in the database, in attribute, you can see that there is a no zero elements are stored in any of the attributes, but while we submit it, it will show us the exact available merchant for that respected query pin code. We will try to explore it in this case. I would like to give you two different merchant names like Polter Retails and the mail ID and the random password, and I will give three different password. In this case, I will give and in the third section I will give, and in the last segment I will give. So these three passwords are going to be stored. Let's suppose we will consider one of the password and try to keep it in our mind. The password will be the last password 121000, and after hitting the submit button, and now again if we going to check our merchant database, we will see that new data is entered, and one more data I will going to upload, like Reuters Enterprises, and the mail ID reuters@mail.com, and again some random password, and this time I will store only two passwords. One is 712235, and also the last remember password is 121000, and try to hit the submit button, and again we will go and check our database, and you can see that the three different rows are stored. Now we will again go to the home page and log in as a buyer. Here in the buyer section I will give my name naval@gmail.com, and in password section we again give some random password. And now this time, before entering the password, I would like to share you the buyer's database, and now you can see that the last password or the last data that I have given on my name is stored. Now before hitting I will give my query pin code, and again we will before entering also we again check out our merchant database, and yes, these are all available. And if I hit, you can see that two different merchant names with respect to the query pin codes are shown. In the same way, if we hit 712235 and okay, here is the issue that I want to show you, that if you enter as a buyer earlier, you can't enter again as the same mail ID. You have to take the different, and each time whenever you enter as a buyer, you have to be a unique buyer mail ID. So here in this segment, if I add 45 and again give some random password, and this time if I try to search, you will see that the two different names are shown, Apario and Reuters. And later in the segment, means earlier in the segment, we show that when we enter the pin code 121000, it is showing Polter and Reuters. So this is basically the implementation of this project in the local computer. I would also like to take you a brief visit on the about project section, where we actually briefly explain how the project is actually works and what is the mission. All are available, and in contact us page you will find all the details respect to ourselves, basically the developers. You can contact us for any query or any issues related to this, and feel free to share any ideas for its further scalability and more enhancement of this application. Thank you. Now moving further to our GitHub page, or basically the GitHub repository that will be also uploaded in the PowerPoint presentation. In this repository, first we are actually created the first folder called instance, which stored the database folders or the database files, which you can easily access through the SQLite Online or any other database applications. In the static part, all the JavaScript, CSS and the any other related JPG images are available. In this template part, we basically provided the front end part, all the HTML files available here, and this is a flowchart PNG, which is actually also shown in the PowerPoint presentation, and here it's also uploaded in the GitHub repo. And the fifth one is the readme file. So in this readme file is in the below part, we have mentioned all the details about this application, and the most important app.py is the backend part which controls the whole application. Then one pincode dataset.csv is provided, which contains the pin code and respective district and state name for the test dataset, and the requirement.txt for all the requirements required before running the application in the local machine. So as I've already introduced you to the problem earlier, so we have used the features also mentioned in the PowerPoint presentation, like Flask integration, SQLite database, and then after we have created an independent merchant model which will handle all the inputs and outputs from the merchant database, and also control whatever the inputs given to the different attributes like merchant name, merchant password, merchant email ID, and the three important attributes like non-zero elements, row indices, and column indices. Then there is another independent part which will contain the buyer database table and the buyer input and output services called buyer model. Then we use different API endpoints like post request, JSON data sends through the database table. Using JSON, we will send all the data to the database table. Then there is a separate merchant pin code retrieval function which will actually able to retrieve the respective merchant details according to the given query pin code. Then there is a data validation and processing which will convert the pin code list to the string for the storage and retrieve them as a list for processing. So basically it converts pin code list to a string before storage, and when retrieval required, it will convert that string into the list. Then there are different API requests and other debugging process to handle the errors, and for initialization and execution we use Flask application. Here as a dependencies we use Flask version v12.0.2, then Flask SQL Alchemy version 3.0.0, Sci-Fi version 1.7.3, and HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and render template. These are the necessary dependencies. Then after, there is a procedure of how to install this application while before running it into a local machine. First you can easily clone it using this command into a local machine. Then after, you will have to create a virtual environment where you can store all the dependencies and other information and adjustments that you have done into this application. Then you have to install all the dependencies by giving this command pip install -r, then space requirements.txt, and last but not the least, you can just write or type simply python space app.py and your application will started running. And then after, you will get a network address. You have to copy it and paste it into that your browser address bar, and your application is in active mode. Then there is a working process or the flow of the data. So it is already mentioned and explained in this earlier presentation part. Then all the necessary purposes, why it's required, and what are the use cases and advantage of this project are mentioned here. And if somebody wants to contribute in this project or any bug they want to fix, they can easily fork that repository, make the changes in the separate branch, and then commit it and ask for a pull request. If that issue is genuine and required to be necessary, it is to change in the main repository, then we will surely accept that pull request. Moreover, that if you have any further idea, you can contact any of our collaborators of this project, either me or my teammate Yash Mukhopadhyay, through this mail ID. And also you can visit our LinkedIn, which is also mentioned in the application page whenever you are going to run it. So this is all about this GitHub repo. Now I would like to introduce you with the deployment in the Google Cloud Platform through Compute Engine VM instances. I have already created one of the VM instances with the default settings and running a Debian command shell, or basically a Linux shell here, and installing all the necessary repositories for running this application. So first of all, as same mentioned in the GitHub repo, we have to install this folder called storage optimization build for Bharat, available in my GitHub profile. Then you have to activate the virtual environment, and then after you can easily start the application in this virtual machine. So here it will give you a local or internal IP addresses, but we will start this project by giving the external IP provided by the virtual machine instance. So for that, here I will provide http:// and it is already here 34.171.143.92:8080, which is a port number, and when we hit the enter, it will take you into that same page which is already shown in the application implementation part. So in the same way you can visit all the steps, and whenever you have any click over here, the response will be reflected in the Linux command cell, as same as when it is working in the local machine. So I have already made the VM instances, and now it's running in virtual machine instance powered by Google Cloud Platform in the same way. So you can go and give again different merchant names like so after we will submit it, and when we visit and again we try to enter through this page and give any name of the buyer, like and again give some random password and give the query pin code, try to submit it, and you will get the respective merchant detail according to that password, according to the given query pin code. But if suppose I am giving a pin code which is not available merchants like this, and try to enter it, it will give you a message, no merchants available for the given pin code. So this is all about this project. Hope you like this project, and we will hoping for further help, and if you have any bugs seen in this application, feel free to contact us and share, or either you can take a pull request on the GitHub page. Thank you.